Hey guys, tonight we're taking a very slow, very damp walk through medieval Ireland, not to storm castles or joust with knights, but to quietly follow a group of monks who, for reasons no one fully agrees on, began hiding wheels of cheese. In cold, dripping caves, you'll hear the squish of peat underfoot, the low clang of monastery bells echoing through the mist, and the occasional squabble over whether a mouldy rind counts as a miracle. You might be thinking, oh, this sounds charming and rustic, but trust me, between the barefoot walks across thorny heather, the endless chants before breakfast, and the daily threat of Viking raids, you probably wouldn't survive long in this tranquil monastic world, especially if you ever misplaced the abbey's best cow. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy history reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking slowly, one foot in front of the other, up a winding trail that hugs the side of a mossy hill. The air is thick with fogs, so thick it looks like the land itself is still sleeping. Your robe clings damply to your ankles, and you can hear nothing but the steady squelch of your sandals and the soft rustle of the wicker basket you're carrying. Inside the basket, a few unassuming lumps of freshly pressed cheese, not yet aged, not yet flavored, not yet blessed by mold or time. These are offerings, early versions of something more important than they look. And though no one's told you directly, you know these cheeses are destined for a particular cave, a secret cave, and you're not supposed to ask why. A bell sounds behind you, the distant clang from the stone chapel tucked in the folds of the valley. The sound is faint, like it's already being swallowed by the fog, but you know its meaning. Sext, midday prayers. The monks will pause in their copying, their farming, their silent contemplation, but not you. Today, your task is more aromatic. The path turns steeper. You pass a cluster of short stone walls ruined, sheep pens, maybe, or ancient property lines no one remembers anymore. Overhead, a rook lets out a guttural croak, then disappears into the mist. Everything is quiet except the wet slap of your feet and the ever so slight slosh of curdled milk in your basket. Medieval glamour, this is not. The cave appears only when you're nearly on top of it, a small, black gap in the side of a craggy rise, just tall enough to crouch into. You pause, you wait. Monks don't knock. You peer in. Inside, it smells predictably like old, damp cheese, and yet not unpleasantly so. There's something earthy about it, something oddly holy. Stacks of rounded cheese wheels lined the stone. Ledges like squat, dairy altars. Each is marked with faint ash or chalk. Some are months old. Some, you suspect, might predate your abbot's ordination. As you place your new contributions gently on a shelf, you notice one cheese with a strange imprint, not just a cross, but a full Celtic knot design pressed into its rind. Decorative, yes, but possibly more. Some monks believe this symbol wards off spoilage. Others think it confuses Viking raiders. No one can agree. Historians still argue whether this tradition was born out of necessity or secrecy. Were the caves simply the best way to keep the cheese cool and safe? Or was there something deeper, some spiritual logic, some lost theological nuance that said, yes, this cheese must be hidden? A drop of water lands on your forehead, then another, The cave has its own slow tempo, drip, 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 like it's praying in its own language. You crouch there for a long moment, watching the droplets race down the stone wall. Everything smells of milk, moss, and the very slow passing of time. You think back to breakfast porridge, a crust of bread, and a dollop of cheese that tasted faintly of wet stone and wild garlic. Not bad. Not good, just medieval. A few jokes have floated around the scriptorium lately. That St. Brendan sailed all the way to America just to find better cheese. That the Book of Kells was originally wrapped in curd-soaked linen for safekeeping. That Brother Ruidri has a second cellar of cheese under his bed. Okay, that last one might actually be true. You head back down the path, empty basket in hand. The fog hasn't lifted it, never really does, but there's a little more definition now. You can just make out the distant glint of the monastery. Roof, its grey slate shining like a coin in the mist. A few sheep wander across your path. One stares at you. You nod respectfully. In this place, in this time, you owe your entire protein intake to sheep and cows, and they know it as you descend. Your robe still damp, your feet aching, and your fingers tinged with the smell of cheese. You wonder, why are we really hiding it? Is it just weather, or war, or worry? Or do we hide it because it's good, and in a world this uncertain, you keep the good things close, secret, and cool? You reach the monastery gate. The bell is ringing. Again nons now. You've missed sext, but you've delivered the cheese. You've done your part tomorrow. You'll do it again. Asterisk, you're not entirely sure how a monastery ended up here, wedged between a mist-soaked cliff and a field that's mostly rocks pretending to be soil. But here it stands, solid and squat. Its stones blackened by rain and time, its windows no more than slits. Its residents wrapped in brown wool and silence. The monks who live here are not exactly social. They rarely speak unless spoken to, and when they do, their words are slow and spare, like each syllable is borrowed from a precious store. You learned quickly that most conversation happens in glances, gestures, and the occasional passive-aggressive hymn. You've been told the monastery is not on any official map. Not because it's secret, exactly, but because no one thought to chart a location this remote. Still, you suspect there's more to it. The roads leading here are intentionally overgrown. Wayposts vanish overnight. Even the sheep seem hesitant to linger too long. You once met a traveling tanner who insisted the entire valley moved slightly eastward when he turned his back. You believed him. Inside the scriptorium, the air smells like ink and cold stone. Illuminated manuscripts rest on tilted desks, half finished. Beside them, small plates of crumbly cheese. You notice patterns now. Some monks place their cheese always on the left, some on the right. One especially pious brother sets his directly on the vellum, perhaps to imbue it with holiness, or maybe just out of spite. Brother Myoizu, who oversees the maps, has one of the largest collections in the region. Rolled up, locked away, inked with red doka outlines and tiny sketches of suspiciously cheese-shaped hills. He rarely lets anyone near them, but you once glimpsed a map where the sea itself was labelled in Latin as Mare Caesario, the cheese sea. Probably a joke. Probably yet. The cave isn't marked on any of them, not even a symbol, nothing. That says here, be cheddar. It's a gap in the knowledge, a deliberate omission. This is odd, because medieval monks recorded everything. Every rainfall, every goat sneeze, every comet, every sermon, and especially every sin, even the ones that might have just been indigestion. But no one writes about the cheese caves. Not directly. Instead, you get vague phrases like stored in the cool earth or blessed beneath the hill. You once saw a marginal doodle of a mouse carrying a haloed cheese wheel that might have been art or a confession. You begin to suspect the maps themselves are red herrings designed not to guide, but to mislead. Anyone who wanted to find the monastery would struggle, and anyone who did find it wouldn't find the caves. It's protection, in a way, for the monks, for the cheese, maybe even for the soul. The monastery itself is built in layers older stones beneath newer ones. Walls repurposed from crumbled abbeys, even Roman ruins. There's a door in the cellar that leads to, well, no one's quite sure. It's bricked. Up now, sealed tight. But Brother Seamus once claimed it was a passage to a place where the cheese never spoiled and time ran backwards. He was very tired when he said this, possibly delirious, definitely holding a wedge of something blue-veined and whispering to it like an old friend out back. Near the kitchen, there's a circular patch of grass that never grows taller than a thumb's length. Supposedly, it's the site of a cheese miracle, a wheel of Gouda that glowed faintly during a famine and fed the entire monastery for 3 days. No one talks about it openly, but you've seen monks pause as they pass it, tipping their hoods slightly. Historians still argue whether Irish monastic communities were trying to isolate themselves from worldly temptation or from each other. Some say it was about getting closer to God. Others suspect it was about getting farther from taxes. But the effect is the same. Small enclaves hidden in folds of land, connected only by whispered roots and occasionally by wandering monks with cheese-scented robes. At Vespers, you sit in the chapel, cold stone beneath you, the chants echoing around the darkened walls. The candles flicker. Someone's stomach growls softly, a reminder that dinner is humble and mostly liquid. But that's okay. You've tucked a sliver of cheese in your sleeve, just in case. After prayers, you walk the cloisters. Rain taps against the slate roof. A frog hops by, unconcerned. You pass Brother Tuathal, who nods, then glances at your sleeve. Just once, not a word is spoken. You return to your small cell. The walls are bare, the blanket thin, the straw mattress unforgiving, but the air is cool and clean, and you sleep knowing the cheese is safe, hidden, aging in peace, somewhere out there on a hillside that isn't. On any map, in a cave that doesn't officially exist, sure wheels of cheese rest on stone shelves, slowly transforming from something forgettable into something precious. Like so much else in this quiet, strange, fog-swept world, it begins with a smell. Not an offensive one, just curious, damp and earthy, like wet wool left in a root cellar, but also with a whiff of something else, sharp, tangy, and unmistakably fermented. You're back in the cheese cave again, crouched beneath its low stone ceiling, brushing aside cobwebs with the reverence one might usually reserve for relics or ancient manuscripts. The cave stretches farther than you remembered. What you thought was a single chamber opens, slowly, into a narrow passage that winds deeper into the hillside, the floor slick with thyme and moss. You follow the scent like a pilgrim chasing incense until you come upon it, the curious case of cave cheese, wheels upon wheels, some round, others lopsided, all marked, all deliberately placed. The shelves are not really shelves at all, just flat stones protruding from the cave walls, like tongues, each one cradling a cheese in various stages of transformation. Some are wrapped in cloth, others in leaves. A few are oozing slightly. All are completely silent, which somehow makes it weirder. And there's no denying it. This is intentional. A whole chamber of cheese. No wine, no bread, no preserved fruit, just cheese, stashed away like treasure, guarded only by the cave's natural chill and the creeping suspicion that if you breathe too hard, the mold will hear you. You lean in, closer to one particularly knobby wheel. Its rind is cracked and blotched with a green-blue fuzz that looks like it could probably file its own monastic tax return. The smell is intense, half meadow, half laundry mistake, but somehow inviting. This cheese has seen things, possibly witnessed a coronation, possibly caused a minor theological schism. There's a small clay token beside it, with a scratchy symbol etched into the surface. A cross, yes, but flanked by what might be a fish, a badger. Historians still argue whether these cave symbols were identifiers, prayers, or simply the monk's attempt at rudimentary cheese branding. You pick up the token, turn it over in your palm. It's warm, oddly, like it remembers the hand that last placed it here. Probably Brother Neeson. He has that furtive look about him, the kind of man who smuggles cheese in his robes and mutters to it under his breath. Further in, the cave ceiling dips low. You duck, brushing against something soft, moss or mold, or perhaps some kind of 10th century dairy angel having a bad hair day. The path narrows, and now you need to sidestep to avoid a wheel of cheese that's almost black with age. It looks fossilized. You're not entirely sure it's still food. It might be a shrine, or a mistake that became tradition. Every monastery, they say, had its quirks. Some focused on illumination, some on healing, others on brewing. But this one, nestled in the folds of nowhere, seems to have taken dairy preservation as its divine mission, and the cave school, steady, whisper quiet, were perfect, not just for hiding cheese from thieves and raiders, but from moisture swings and curious visitors. You run your fingers along the cave wall. It's slick with condensation, the stone cold to the touch. The temperature down here doesn't change, not really. Summer, winter, feast days or fast, this place hums with stillness. And cheese, as it turns out, loves that. Historians often overlook the role of caves in early food science. But here, long before refrigeration, monks discovered what we now call a controlled microclimate. Not that they'd have used that phrase. They probably just said, put it where it's chilly and no one will touch it. Still, there's something ritualistic about it. The way the cheeses are spaced, the marks, the faint scorch on the ceiling, like someone once burned herbs, here maybe to bless the batch, or maybe just to cover the smell, some scholars argue. The monks treated this place like a sacred cellar. Others claim they were just hiding cheese from abbots who'd instituted overly strict fasting rules. You sit on a rock and rest. Your basket, emptied earlier in the day, sits beside you. You take out a small round wheel tucked into your sleeve. Don't worry, everyone does it tanned. Place it gently on an empty ledge. For a moment, the silence is absolute. Then a drop of water falls, landing with a gentle plink on the rind. A blessing, maybe, or just cave life. You stand, stretch, and prepare to leave. But as you turn, your foot taps something. A stone. No, another. Clay token, half buried in the dirt. This one has a symbol you've never seen, like two spirals joined at the base. You brush it clean and pocket it. Later, you'll show it to Brother Male ISU. He'll pretend not to be interested, then spends 6 hours redrawing it in his codex while humming suspiciously. You crawl back toward the cave entrance, emerging into the fog with the unmistakable sense that you've just left a hidden world, one older than you expected, one that smells, faintly, like wisdom and slightly expired milk as you make your way downhill. A light breeze stirs the heather. The monastery glows dimly in the distance, a patch of warmth in a world of grey. You wonder again why this tradition exists, why all this trouble, all this secrecy, all these mouldy wheels aging in the dark. But then you remember the silence of the cave, and the way that one drop of water fell just so, and you think maybe some things are worth hiding not because they're shameful, but because they're sacred. Even cheese, asterisk, you rise the next morning to the sound of the bell matins. Long before dawn, when even the roosters are still asleep and the fog has yet to stretch its fingers, your robe is already damp before you even reach the cloister. The stone underfoot is slick with dew, and your breath clouds the air like incense. Today is cheese day. That means no copying manuscripts, no turning soil in the upper field, and mercifully, no debating Brother Ronan over whether Adam's first meal included soft curd. Instead, you'll spend the day in the dairy hall, an open-beamed stone structure that smells of milk, smoke, and quiet defiance. The defiance, mostly, comes from the cows. There are 6 of them, each named after a saint. Possibly ironically. Brigid, Columba, Brendan, Eta Charan, and the unpredictable Finian. They are sleek, wide-eyed, and slightly passive-aggressive. You approach with your bucket, as always, apologizing gently in case they're feeling moody. Brendan flicks his tail at you like you've just insulted his mother. Milking begins before the sun has fully risen. It's a slow, meditative process. The rhythmic squeeze, the sound of milk hitting the wooden pail, the occasional snort. One of the younger monks, Brother Enetrice, singing a psalm to the cows to keep them calm. It works until he forgets the words and switches to humming something suspiciously close to an old tavern tune. You don't correct him. The cows seem to like it. Once the milk is gathered, the real work begins. It's taken to the fermentation room, a dark, low-ceilinged space where curdling happens under close watch. There, in large clay vessels, you heat the milk gently over smouldering peat. The smell is immediate and unforgettable, like porridge left out too long. But with holy intentions, you add rennet extracted from a sheep's stomach and stirred in with a carved birch spoon that, according to Brother Seamus, has never once sinned. You're not sure what he means. You're afraid to ask as the milk thickens into curds. You begin the separation process, cutting the curd, stirring, heating again. It's meticulous, almost prayerful. Every movement has meaning. The monks believe that precision honors God, or, at the very least, keeps the cheese from tasting like regret. Once the curds are ready, they're scooped into round wooden molds lined with linen. The way what's left behind is drained off and reused. Nothing is wasted. Brother Tuathel sometimes drinks it straight, which alarms everyone, including the cows. The newly formed cheese wheels are then pressed with stones to remove excess moisture. The stones are carefully chosen, flat, heavy, and just slightly irregular, so that each wheel takes on its own personality. Some of them are so old they have names. There's one they call Saint Flaticus. No one remembers why. All of this is tracked in the abbey's cheese ledger, weathered manuscript kept under lock and key in the abbot's chamber. It includes dates, batches, notes on texture, unexpected flavors, and the occasional passive Note about Brother Fergal's careless rennet ratios. It also includes a sketch of a cow wearing what appears to be a halo. That page has a faint butter stain by midday. The wheels are removed from the presses and set on planks to dry. You flip them gently, as instructed, every hour or so. This part takes patience and a good sense of smell. If one starts to turn, you'll know. Oh, you'll know. Historians still debate whether this cheese-making regimen was purely about survival, or whether it served a higher symbolic role in monastic life. Some believe the act of turning curds into cheese was seen as a spiritual transformation, a kind of edible metaphor for personal sanctification. Others argue it was just the only way to make something vaguely appetizing for medieval milk still. The schedule is unwavering. Cheese is flipped, logged, salted, and sung too softly under the breath, like a lullaby for curds. Each monk has his own secret cheese hymn. Yours involves a lot of humming and the occasional line about cows being holier than kings. Again, you're not alone in this. By late afternoon, the cheese wheels are ready for their next phase. Some will stay in the dairy for further drying. Others, if they're judged worthy and firm enough, will be taken to the caves. You help prepare a batch for transport, wrapped in cloth, tied with twine, marked with the monastery seal, a delicate cross within a circle, hand-stamped using a carved turnip dipped in soot. It's not elegant, but it works. Like everything here, you load them into baskets, slinging the weight over your shoulder. It's a short walk to the hillside, but steep. As you trudge uphill, your knees complaining and your robe snagging on gorse, you wonder how did anyone decide this was the best way to make cheese. And then you reach the cave, cool, silent, timeless. You place the wheels on their shelves, like offerings. Each is turned precisely, aligned just so. Brother Neeson murmurs something under his breath, a prayer, maybe, or a warning. Then he tucks a sprig of heather between two wheels, for luck or scent. You've stopped asking. As you leave, you turn for one last look. In the low light, the rows of cheese glow faintly, as if lit from within. Holy or not, it's strangely beautiful. Rain again. Always rain. You stand beneath the edge of the roof, watching the steady drizzle soak the grass and turn the paths into puddles. The air smells of wet wool, peat smoke, and somehow cheese, faint but ever present, like a memory that won't leave. Today's weather has everyone on edge. Not because monks dislike rain, they're mostly indifferent to it, but because dampness is the sworn enemy of all things dairy. Cheese doesn't mind cold. Cheese even enjoys the dark. But let too much moisture into the air, and you'll have more blue fuzz than parchment in the scriptorium. You tug your hood over your head and slosh your way toward the outbuildings. Behind you, Brother Tuathel is chasing a chicken that's just walked through the refectory again, completely unfazed by the rules of silence or cleanliness. Your destination is the storehouse around, low building where the monks keep preserved goods, salted fish, dried herbs, some suspiciously hard bread, and, of course, cheese, not yet cave-ready. Inside, the smell hits you like a wall, strong, tangy, slightly floral. Definitely a warning that at least one wheel has gone too far and become something else entirely. You find Brother Fergal already inside, wiping moisture off the rinds with a square of old linen. He doesn't say anything, just nods in the way. Monks do when disaster has already begun and denial is the only path left. A soft squelch confirms your fears. One of the wheels has absorbed too much moisture. It's bloated slightly, cracked down one side, and started to leak a soft, weepy brine. Brother Fergal sighs. We could try praying over it, you'd suggest, only half joking. He shrugs. Couldn't hurt. You both lean in and perform the least formal blessing in abbey history. The cheese quivers in response. You step back. Rain makes everything harder. It soaks the paths to the caves, turns the hillsides into slippery traps, and tempts mice into the storehouse, sharp-eyed little things that seem to have memorized the monk's entire schedule. Even the cats, though theoretically employed for this purpose, tend to nap right through most rodent activity. Vikings are another threat, albeit less frequent. The monastery, hidden in the hills and distant from the sea, is rarely targeted, but not never. A single sighting of a long ship is enough to send the monks into their practiced panic, valuables into the crypt, sacred books into the bog, cheese into the caves. There's an old legend that once, during a particularly bold raid, the monks of a coastal monastery disguised their cheese as rocks by coating it in soot and dust. The raiders, uninterested in geology, left it untouched. Whether true or not, Brother Simus still insists on lightly dusting our cheese every winter, just in case. Rodents are the most insidious enemy, though. The monastery's population of mice seems somehow smarter than average. They avoid traps, they chew through baskets. They once got into the abbot's cheese cupboard and ate only the most aged specimens, ignoring the fresher wheels completely. This led to a week-long debate about whether mice have taste or merely sin. Historians still argue whether medieval monastic food storage was as clever as we give it credit for, or just desperate. But one thing is certain, the caves weren't merely hiding places. They were a last defense, a sanctuary not just for monks, but for milk turned solid, sacred, and resistant to the whims of rain, rats, and raiders alike. By midday, the rain has lightened enough for you to risk the path. You pack the salvageable cheeses into a dry cloth, sling them across your back, and begin the trudge uphill. Every step squelches. The mud tries to eat your sandals. Somewhere behind you, Brother Tuathal curses quietly as he slips and lands in what used to be a path and is now just regret. At the cave entrance, you pause. Water drips from the moss above. Inside, it's cool and oddly dry, proof that these limestone hollows were chosen not just for concealment, but for their natural insulation. The air here is constant, predictable, a perfect, patient guardian. You place the new wheels gently beside the older ones, rotating a few to prevent spots. You wipe down a bloomed rind with your sleeve and mutter an apology for the linen. It's probably been through worse. Then you spot something odd. A small wheel, smaller than most, set behind the others. You don't remember it being here. Its cloth is dark, almost black, and marked with a stitched symbol you've never seen to. Curved lines meeting in a sharp X dot. You reach for it, brother. Nee's voice floats from the shadows. Don't touch that one. You nearly jump out of your robe. He steps forward, hands clasped behind his back, eyes on the cheese that wheels. Special, he says. Special how? He pauses, the cave silent, but for the steady drip from the ceiling. No one remembers. He finally says, but they say it belonged to a saint. Or maybe it caused a fire. Either way, we don't touch it. You nod, because, in a cave like this, you don't question sacred cheese. You leave the cave, slower than usual, your basket empty but your mind oddly full. So many threats to a single wheel of cheese, so many rituals to protect it, and yet the cheese endures, because here, in this odd, rain-soaked corner of the world, it's not just food, it's history. Asterisk, the sky's clear the next morning, just a pale breath of blue opening above the greening hills. You rise before the bells, as usual, tugging your woolen robe over sleepy limbs and stepping barefoot onto the cold stone floor. The chapel will wait. Today, you're headed to the caves. Early you slip past the refectory, where Brother Tuathal is already boiling oats with the intensity of a man waging war. Past the cloisters, where one of the novices has fallen asleep while sweeping and is now being gently prodded awake by a disapproving chicken. And then up, always up, toward the limestone mouth in the hillside that smells faintly of milk, moss, and mystery. This morning's task isn't inspection, it's rotation. Every wheel, once placed, must be turned precisely once every week. Not flip cheese, does not enjoy acrobatics, but rotated a quarter turn. Some monks find it tedious. You find it meditative. Each wheel has its own heft, its own faint aroma, its own personality. There's a peace in tending to something so still and yet so alive. You hum softly as you work, a half-forgotten psalm that sounds suspiciously like a drinking song. The cave echoes back your voice, warm and round, as if agreeing. As you reach for one of the older wheels, one of the summer cheeses, you feel a shift under your fingers. Not a crack, not spoilage, but ripeness. The cheese is ready. You press a thumb gently into the rind. It yields slightly, like the side of a tired old man. Perfect. You call it Brother Bevan's cheese not because he made it, but because he once dropped it while fleeing a goose, and the dent has never quite smoothed out. You carry Brother Bevan's cheese carefully down the slope, shielding it from the wind as though it were a relic. And, in a way, it is. The monastery doesn't just eat cheese, it lives by it. During long fasts, only cheese technically, not meat offers any real nourishment. During lean years, cheese becomes currency, traded with local farmers for barley, with visiting monks for news, sometimes even with pilgrims for candles and ink. And during winter, when the sheep barely graze and the cows grow stubborn, cheese is the one taste of summer that still lingers. Historians still argue whether like yours were self-sufficient marvels of organization or barely held together experiments in communal chaos. You'd argue for the latter, but only because you've seen Brother Tuathal try to boil peas. You pass the scriptorium on your way in, catching the scent of ink and candle soot. Inside, rows of monks bend over vellum, copying texts with such precision that even the letters seem nervous. One of them, Brother Senan, is working on an illuminated manuscript of Genesis. You peek in and see that he's added a cow in the margin next to Adam. The cow looks smug. You approve in the refectory. The wheel is placed on the central table like an offering. The abbot eyes it as though it might speak. There's a solemnity to it, almost a ritual. Brother Neeson gives the blessing, invoking saints and seasons. And sheep with equal reverence. Then comes the knife. One clean, gliding slice through the rind, revealing the creamy, pale interior. A sigh rises from the monks, involuntary and heartfelt. The flavor is sharp but not rude, deep but not overwhelming. It lingers at the edges of your mouth like a hymn half sung. You eat slowly, because this is more than food, its memory. The grass of last summer, the milk of a cow who's probably forgotten she gave it, the hands that stirred and pressed and salted, the days spent aging in cool silence. Every wheel tells a story. Sometimes, literally, one of the oldest cheeses in the cave heart. Crumbling relic wrapped in 3 layers of wax wars, once used to smuggle a note to another monastery. Inside, scratched onto a strip of birch bark, were instructions for making blue dye from elderberries. Vital information disguised as lunch. You think of that often. That even as invaders roamed the coasts, even as kingdoms rose and fell and sheep continued their reign of indifference, monks were tucking knowledge into cheese and hoping it would survive. You spend the afternoon back in the caves, this time, with Brother Fergal, checking the new wheels placed last month. One has developed a hint of mold on the outer cloth, which Fergal insists is a blessing in disguise. You aren't sure what kind of disguise involves fuzz, but you nod. He tells you stories as you work, about a monastery that used to chant psalms to its cheese every evening, about a saint who dreamed of the Virgin Mary cradling a wheel of cheddar, about a wheel so old it became hollow, and a mouse set up house inside and refused to leave. They named the mouse Benedict, naturally. Sometimes you wonder how many of these tales are true. But then again, in a world where monks bake prayers into bread and draw dragons into margins for fun, truth bends like the branches in a windstorm. The final wheel you turn is small, dense, and wrapped in nettle leaves. A spring cheese, you whisper to it, just in case. And as you make your way back down the hill, the wind tugs at your robe and the sun slips behind a cloud again. Rain, perhaps, tomorrow. But today, the cheese is safe, and that's enough. Rain does come, of course. It always does when you've just washed your robe. It arrives like a quiet guest, slipping in sideways through the hedgerows and dripping off the eaves. The hills blur into grey, and the goats take shelter under the old walnut tree near the chapel. Grumbling like old men denied their morning tea, inside the monastery everything slows. The air thickens with damp wool, candle wax, and the sharp temps of boiled turnips. You watch droplets form on the windowsill beside your pallet, each one sliding lazily down the glass like it, too, has just finished copying 40 verses of Leviticus. Rainy days mean indoor work, and for cheese, that means preparation. There's milk to collect from the cellar yesterday's batch, cooled overnight in crocks. Brother Coleman handles the first step, heating it gently in a wide copper cauldron suspended over the hearth. He stirs with a great wooden paddle, humming a tune that's either a lullaby or a warning to the curds not to misbehave. You take over. At the next stage, adding rennet. Today, it's a calf renneted sliver of dried stomach lining from a young cow that died of a chill last winter. The use of animal rennet still sparks debate among some monks. Historians still argue whether early Irish monasteries strictly adhered to vegetarian principles or allowed pragmatic exceptions, especially in remote regions like this. The general consensus in your kitchen seems to be, if God didn't want us to make cheese, He wouldn't have given us cows or calf stomachs. Within the hour, the milk separates. Curds rise, plump and soft, while the whey drifts beneath them, cloudy and bitter. You slice the curds with a lyre-like tool, letting the whey flow free. The smell is earthy, slightly sour, and oddly comforting like childhood. If you grew up in a barn, Brother Lorcan enters just in time to avoid actual labour. He carries a bit of gossip. A neighbouring abbey has received a gift from a Norse trader, chunk of hard cheese wrapped in linen and ash, sharper than judgment and twice as old. Some say the Norsemen learned cheesemaking from the Franks. Others claim it came from the east, brought by traders who rode camels and smelled of cinnamon. You nod politely, all while focusing on gently folding the curds into their cloth molds. The cheesecloths are lined with salt. Generously, always generously. Salt doesn't just preserve the cheese, it shapes its soul. Without it, everything spoils. With too much, you might as well chew a brick. The balance is an art, and Brother Churned is the artist. He pinches a handful of salt between two fingers, lets it drift like snow over the curds, and declares the batch blessed enough to make angels drool. You press the curds into round wooden molds, each marked with a different rune, not for decoration, for tracking. Some monks use Latin letters, others numbers, but your abbey, like many in the West, still leans into old Irish Ogham script. You slide the R rune, ruse, the elder tree onto the first mold. It means this cheese was made on a rainy day. You add another tin for the fire that warmed the curds. Every wheel becomes a weather report, a memory wrapped in wax. You press the curds slowly, applying weights made of polished river stones. Over hours, the whey oozes out, and the cheeses shrink into tight, dense rounds. They'll rest here overnight, then head for the cave, somewhere between the pressing and the cleanup. Brother Earchade sneaks in with a sliver of last month's cheese and a pinch of herbs pilfered from the garden. He claims it's research. You suspect it's just second lunch. You join him anyway. The cheese is young, still a bit squeaky between your teeth, but full of promise. The herb sorrel and wild garlic brighten it into something mischievous. Monks aren't supposed to delight in food, but you do. Later, as the rain thickens into a curtain, you find yourself in the scriptorium, leafing through a borrowed manuscript. From Armart, in the margin of one psalm, is a tiny drawing of a monk feeding cheese to a fox. No explanation, no context, just that, a wedge of cheese and a fox with raised eyebrows. You wonder if it really happened. Maybe the fox was a pet. Maybe it stole a wheel and the monk bargained it back. Or maybe the scribe was simply bored and wanted to amuse some future reader. It works. You copy the drawing into your own notes, just under a list of cheeses currently aging in the cave. You label it, the fox that liketh cheese. Thunder rolls in the distance. Brother Tuathal curses, quietly but creatively, as his firewood pile collapses. You set aside the manuscript and light a fresh candle. The monastery breathes in time with the rain. Drips echo down the hallway. The presses creak gently in the kitchen. Somewhere a goat sneezes, and beneath your feet, in the limestone cave tucked deep into the hill, dozens of wheels lie resting. Becoming the process is slow, almost maddeningly so. Weeks pass before anything resembling flavor emerges. Months before true maturity arrives. But in a world where kingdoms crumble in seasons and lives can vanish between harvests, cheese is patient. And patience is holy. The next morning. The sun returns like an apology, sheepish and squinting, rising through clouds that still sulk at the edges of the sky. Everything glistens. Leaves drip, stones steam. And the monastery feels like it's just been baptized all over again. It's a perfect day to descend into the cave. You gather the newly pressed wheels, each wrapped in cheesecloth, marked with runes, and still faintly warm from the press. Brother Churned joins you, humming something off-key as he stacks the wheels onto a small sled, tied with a rope handle. It's an old monastic trick sled's work better than carts on the narrow paths leading down to the cheese cave, especially when the grass is still wet. The cave mouth hides behind a thorn bush and a crooked ash tree. If you didn't know it was there, you might walk right past it, which is, of course, the whole point. You duck your head and step into cool shadow. The temperature drops immediately, maybe 10 degrees, maybe more. Your breath fogs faintly. The walls are close and damp, lined with lichen and trickling moss. Far ahead, the tunnel opens into a broader chamber carved centuries ago by underground rivers and monastic hands alike. Some say this cave once held silver. Others claim it was used by druids for rituals involving birds and blindfolds, and at least one flute carved from a bear's thigh bone. Historians still argue whether early Irish monastic sites were deliberately built near older pagan sacred spaces or simply inherited the best geography by chance. All you know is that this cave smells like stone, salt, and sleep. The shelves are stone ledges carved directly into the walls. Upon them sit dozens of rounds, some grey with ash, others pale gold, a few growing soft white fuzz, like the beards of sleepy saints. You place your newest additions at the far end, near a vent where the breeze is strongest. Cheese, like monks, needs fresh air if it's going to age gracefully. Brother Churned lights a lantern and begins the weekly inspection. It's his favorite task. He pokes each wheel gently, as if waking a dozing cat, checks for unwanted molds, rotates a few meters to himself like a medieval cheese whisperer. You take notes in a little wax tablet. Rue as batch miner, cracking on rind, no weeping. Mold, white, grey, even spread. Smell, promising. One wheel humming, possibly metaphorical. You both pause to sniff that one again. It smells earthy, nutty, with just a hint of wet parchment. Not bad, not quite ready. A bat flutters overhead, and Brother Churned flinches dramatically, nearly toppling a shelf. You remind him, for the 50th time, that the bats live here and you're the guests. He mutters something uncharitable and makes the sign of the cross, just in case. You spend an hour in the cave, turning, tapping, sometimes whispering prayers. Some monks claim that blessing the cheese helps it mature faster. Others insist silence is better. One particularly eccentric brother insists Gregorian chant produces fewer cracks. You've tried it all. Honestly, it probably makes no difference, but singing does pass the time. Today you hum quietly as you work. An old Irish melody. Something about a woman who turned into a seal and married a fisherman. You forget the ending. Before leaving, brother Churned selects a test, round 1 from 2 months ago, aged just enough to begin revealing its character. You carry it up carefully, shielded in a basket lined with dry rushes. Above ground, the light feels aggressive after so much cool shadow. You blink, adjust, and trudge back to the kitchen. The monks gather like moths. Cheese tasting is serious business. Brother Tuathal slices the round with a small knife. It's firm but not dry, pale yellow with a soft bloom around the rind. The smell is promising grassy, nutty, with a faint sharpness that catches in the nose. Everyone gets a sliver. The chewing is almost reverent. Then the commentary begins. Too young? No, just shy. Hints of heather. Is that nettle? Lacks salt. Too much salt. You say that every time. Because you always oversalt. It goes on like this for some time. You take notes, mostly for formality. In truth, everyone's opinion is shaped by breakfast, mood, and how recently their sandals gave them blisters. Eventually, consensus is reached. The cheese is decent, a little young, but full of potential. It will be moved to a different shelf, one with slightly more moisture, and checked again in 3 weeks. After the tasting, Brother Earchade offers to write a poem about it. He's been experimenting with cheese metaphors in his psalter. His latest couplet rhymed bliss with Brigid's kiss, and you're still trying to decide whether that's genius or grounds for penance. In the quiet that follows, you slice off a bit more for yourself. Let it melt on your tongue. This cheese is no mere food. It's a message from past you to future you, wrapped in cloth and patience. It's a little miracle, pulled from grass and gut and time, and it still needs hiding. You make a note to visit the second cave next week, for one higher in the hills, behind the hawthorn grove, the one no raider ever found, because cheese, like faith, survives best in the dark. Asterisk, the wind changes. It's not much, just a shift in its tone. A different sort of whistle through the cloister arches, but you feel it. And around here, when the wind shifts, it means someone's coming. The lookout, Brother Finton, confirms it before noon. He appears at the chapel door, wide-eyed and panting, which, for a man who considers walking a form of suffering, is saying, "Something abode," he gasps, "off the coast. 2 men rowing, one steering, one playing a flute, which feels unnecessary." You sigh. Visitors in medieval Ireland are never simple. They're either pilgrims, raiders, messengers, or very lost fishermen. You'll be lucky if they aren't all 3 at once. You signal the others. Time to initiate the routine. Hide valuables, cover paths, stash anything remotely edible, and bury the cheese. Not metaphorically, literally. Brother Churned grabs his shovel. You grab your hood. The wheel selected for burial today is a large one, marked with 3 carved crosses and a reddish rind from its time aging near the smokehouse. It's just reaching its peak, which, naturally, makes it a prime target for theft. Out behind the beehives lies the designated false graveyard. No real monks rest here, just rounds of cheese, some old bones arranged artfully, and one wooden cross that reads, "Here lies Brother Curdsworth." It was a joke at first, but now it feels sacred. You dig swiftly. The earth is soft, black, and vaguely sweet-smelling. Beneath the soil lies a hidden chamber lined with stones and insulated with dried moss. Cool, dry, perfect. The cheese goes in, just in time, because here come the visitors. 3 men, indeed. One still playing the flute, which is maddeningly cheerful. They introduce themselves as pilgrims from the north, though their accents suggest otherwise. One wears a ring with a Norse symbol. Another carries a satchel that looks suspiciously empty, like it's waiting to be filled. Hospitality rules bind you, of course. You offer bread, water, a seat near the fire. Not much else. The monks put on their humble but slightly unhinged act. It usually works. Brother Earchade starts chanting backwards. Brother Tuathal recites local laws about cheese theft in Old Irish until the visitors look ready to cry. Still, they linger. Their eyes flick toward the cellar, the larder, the cheese press. You deflect with tales of fasting. "We only eat wild herbs now," you say solemnly, "and occasionally the bark of righteous trees." Brother Churned adds, "Our most recent cheese batch was cursed by a wren, exploded on the altar." Tragic. The men look alarmed. One mutters about getting back to the boat. You walk them down the path yourself, just to be safe. Only when the flute player is safely back on the water and you can no longer hear the screechy tune echoing across the waves do you let your shoulders drop Back at the monastery, Brother Finton has drawn a small comic of the encounter. In it, the flute player is eaten by a goat. You all agree it's wildly inaccurate. The goats here don't eat people. Usually. That evening, as twilight paints the stones with gold, you unearth the cheese. The smell sweet, nutty, complex. It's still safe. You clean it gently and place it back in the cave, right near the entrance this time. If it's stolen tonight, so be it. Some losses are worth the lesson, but it won't be, because, while monks may kneel before God, they bow to no one when it comes to hiding cheese. You take a last walk before bed. The moon is low. The waves slap quietly against the rocks. Somewhere in the dark, an owl calls. You think about those 3 men, what they really came for. Pilgrims, perhaps, or scouts for something worse. Raiders always start with scouts. The idea twists inside. Your stomach. Not because you fear a fight, because you fear losing what's been built here, this tiny, fragrant, damp little kingdom of monks and myths and moldy perfection. You stop at the cave entrance, just to check. Inside, the shelves breathe peace. Cheese rests like old scrolls, each wheel a promise, each rind a scripture in its own right. They glow faintly in the lantern light. You whisper goodnight to them. You think of something Brother Earchade said once. After a particularly explosive batch, God gives us miracles, but it's up to us to ferment them properly. You didn't understand it then, now you do. It starts with a flick of parchment, just one slip of vellum falling to the floor, its edge curling upward like it's trying to escape. You wouldn't have noticed it, except it lands with a whisper to crisp for coincidence. And when you stoop to pick it up there, tucked beneath a Latin prayer about humility, a tiny drawing of a wheel of cheese. Well, not exactly a drawing, more like a map, a cheese map. You glance around the scriptorium. 4 monks are scribbling with various degrees of fervor. One is drooling onto his own foot. No one looks up. You carefully fold the parchment and slip it into your habit, because here's what you're beginning to suspect. The monks aren't just scribes. They're smugglers, not of silver, not of relics, but of cheese. Back in your cell, by the dim candlelight, you study the paper. It shows the island roughly sketched, a few too many puffins and a winding path that doesn't appear on any other monastery map. It snakes through the woods, over a small hill, and ends at a cross-shaped symbol that's been doodled, redoodled, and circled 3 times. The implication is clear. Hidden cheese. Possibly ancient cheese. Potentially illegal cheese. You look again. There's a small inscription at the bottom, in Old Irish. It says, "Only for those with clean souls and clean fingernails." You check your nails. Good enough. The next morning, you begin your walk early, before the others wake. The path leads through familiar trees, but then forks where it shouldn't. And just beyond that, you find something strange. A pile of rocks, carefully stacked in a pattern that looks accidental, but isn't. You pull one loose. Behind it, a narrow tunnel. You duck inside. It smells ... incredible. The air is rich, damp, tinged with salt and smoke, and the sharp tang of something aged and defiant. As your eyes adjust, you see it. Dozens of small wheels of cheese nestled in the rock. Some newer, some ancient. One with a layer of moss that might qualify as a pet. Another that glows faintly blue. Beside the wheels are notes. Not scrolls, just scraps. Recipes, odd jokes, and suspicious accounting. Brother Sean owes 3 wheels for last Lent. If anyone eats the smoked ash rind again, may the Lord smite your molars. Do not tell the abbot about this cave. He cries to Isolde, it hits you. This is no random stash. This is an operation. You hear a noise behind you, Brother Eochaid, holding 2 goats and looking more guilty than usual. Ah, he says. So you found the secondary chapel. You raise an eyebrow, where we contemplate dairy theology. You fold your arms. Fine, he sighs. We're running a distribution ring. As it turns out, it started small. Just a few wheels hidden from the abbey's official rations. Then a few more, bartered to passing pilgrims for wine or new ink for the scribes. Then they started recording recipes, better than any continental monasteries, they claimed. Some were so good that people came from as far as Munster just to barter for a wedge, but we never sold it. Eochaid says quickly, never coin, that would be sacrilegious. We traded for knowledge, for texts, for that weird Italian thing that cuts parchment like butter.